The mystery of the Halloween lantern path. It was a crisp Halloween evening, the kind where the air carried the scent of fallen leaves, and the whispers of the forest seemed almost alive. Lysander stood at the edge of the woods, gazing at the familiar autumn landscape that stretched out before him. The ground beneath his boots was covered in a thick carpet of leaves, golden, crimson, and amber, rustling softly as the evening breeze brushed through the trees. The sky above was painted in deep shades of violet and indigo, with the last rays of the setting sun slowly disappearing beyond the horizon, casting long shadows across the woods. Halloween was a quiet, introspective time for Lysander. Unlike the village children, who were now donning costumes and readying themselves for a night of playful mischief, Lysander found himself drawn to the stillness of nature. There was something special about this night, a sense of magic that he couldn't quite explain, as if the world itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. It was on nights like these, when the veil between worlds felt thin, that he preferred solitude, walking the forest paths and allowing his thoughts to wander. But tonight, there was an inexplicable pull drawing him deeper into the woods. Lysander had explored these trails many times before, yet tonight, under the rising full moon, the forest felt different, alive, almost watchful. As he took a few steps forward, the crunch of leaves underfoot seemed louder, sharper, as if the trees themselves were listening. Then, something unusual caught his eye. Far down a narrow path that he had never noticed before, a small flickering light appeared, faint and almost ethereal. Squinting, he leaned closer, holding his breath as if he might break the spell of the moment. To his surprise, the light didn't vanish. It remained steady, glowing softly through the darkness. His pulse quickened slightly as more lights began to appear, one after another, illuminating a trail that wound deeper into the forest. Curiosity stirred within him, as did a sense of wonder that he hadn't felt in years. The lights weren't torches or candles. They were lanterns, delicate and ornate, each one hanging carefully from the branches of the trees, glowing with a soft, amber light that seemed to warm the cool evening air. They swayed gently in the breeze, casting playful shadows that danced among the trunks, beckoning him forward. Lysander stepped closer, his gaze fixed on the lantern-lit path. Had these lanterns been here before? He was certain they hadn't. He would have noticed something so strange, so beautiful. But tonight, they seemed to appear out of nowhere, as if conjured by the forest itself. A shiver ran down his spine, not of fear, but of anticipation. What lay beyond those glowing lights? Where did the path lead? The rational part of his mind warned him to turn back, to avoid venturing into places unknown. But the soft, golden glow of the lanterns drew him in, stirring a longing for adventure and discovery. With a deep breath, Lysander took his first step toward the path. The leaves crunched beneath his boots, and the moment he moved, the forest seemed to come alive. The lanterns flickered, as if in greeting, their warm light illuminating the ground around him. The air was filled with the faint scent of pine and earth, and above him, the first stars of the evening began to twinkle against the deepening sky. As he continued down the path, the familiar world of the village and its celebrations slipped away, replaced by the quiet magic of the forest. The lanterns guided his way, each one casting a soft pool of light that melted into the next, creating a luminous trail that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. For the first time in a long while, Lysander felt a sense of wonder and excitement bubbling up within him. This was not a trick of light or a fleeting illusion. It was something real, something ancient, and he was being invited to discover it. With each step, the path seemed to grow darker, the forest deeper, until all that remained was the soft glow of the lanterns and the sound of his own heartbeat echoing in his ears. Lysander knew there was no turning back now. The lanterns had chosen him for a reason, and he would follow their light, no matter where it led. The further Lysander walked along the lantern-lit path, the more the forest seemed to change around him. The towering trees arched overhead, their twisted branches weaving together like a protective canopy, casting intricate patterns of shadows on the ground. The air grew cooler and heavier, filled with a scent that was both earthy and sweet, like pine needles and freshly fallen leaves mixed with the faintest trace of honey. Each lantern he passed radiated a soft, steady glow, creating small circles of warmth in the otherwise dark and endless woods. With every step, the outside world seemed to fade further away, replaced by an otherworldly stillness. There was no sound but the quiet rustling of leaves and the soft crunch of twigs beneath his boots. It was as if the entire forest was holding its breath, waiting. And yet, despite the silence, Lysander didn't feel alone. He could sense eyes upon him, watchful, but not unkind, as though the forest itself was curious about his presence. He paused beneath one of the lanterns, looking up at its delicate frame. It was unlike any lantern he had seen before, made of thin, twisted metal that resembled vines, adorned with small carvings of leaves and flowers. Inside, the flame flickered, not like a candle, but more like a living thing, a small glowing orb of light that floated gently within the glass. As he watched, the light seemed to pulse, responding to his gaze, its glow brightening for just a moment before dimming again. Intrigued, Lysander reached out, his fingers brushing the cold metal of the lantern's frame. The moment he touched it, a soft hum reverberated through his hand, sending a gentle warmth up his arm. He drew back in surprise, his heart beating faster. It was as if the lantern were alive, responding to his presence. But before he could think further, something else caught his attention. Just beyond the next turn in the path, a new light appeared. This one different from the steady amber glow of the lanterns. It was smaller, softer, and blue, hovering in the air like a tiny star. As he stepped closer, he realized it was a small, glowing moth. Its wings shimmered like pieces of moonlight, delicate and ethereal. The moth fluttered around one of the lanterns, circling it 3 times before darting further down the path. Without thinking, Lysander followed. The moth flitted from lantern to lantern, each time pausing just long enough for him to catch up, as if it were guiding him deeper into the woods. He noticed that as it moved, other small lights began to appear. Tiny fireflies and glowing beetles, their soft lights blinking and flickering in the darkness. The path was no longer just lined with lanterns. It was alive with a constellation of small, luminescent creatures that floated and danced around him. Lysander's steps slowed as he took in the sight. The forest had transformed into a dreamlike place, filled with glimmers of light and shadow, the trees towering above him like silent sentinels. He marveled at the beauty around him, his breath misting in the cool air. There was magic here, old and powerful, and he could feel it thrumming through the ground beneath his feet, vibrating softly in the air around him. As he continued, something strange began to happen. The further he walked, the more the path seemed to change. The ground beneath him, once covered in a thick layer of leaves, was now a smooth carpet of soft moss, glowing faintly under the light of the lanterns. The trees, too, seemed different, larger, their trunks twisted and gnarled, with bark that shimmered as though dusted with gold. The forest was shifting, reshaping itself around him. And then, in the distance, he saw it. Resting beneath one of the largest trees he had ever seen was a small wooden box, half buried in a bed of glowing moss. The box was intricately carved, with swirling patterns that resembled the delicate veins of leaves. It looked ancient, almost as if it had grown out of the earth itself. Lysander knelt beside it, his fingers tracing the carvings. The wood was smooth and cool to the touch, and as he lifted the lid, the hinges creaked softly, like the sigh of the wind through the trees. Inside, nestled on a cushion of velvet, was a small golden acorn. Lysander stared at it, mesmerized. The acorn seemed to glow faintly, as if lit from within. When he picked it up, it was surprisingly heavy for its size, its surface warm against his palm. He turned it over, noticing a tiny engraving on one side, a delicate spiral that twisted inward like the curl of a fern. There was something familiar about the symbol, something that tugged at his memory, but he couldn't place it. He glanced around, half expecting someone or something to appear and explain the acorn's significance. But the forest remained silent, the lanterns casting their steady glow as if watching and waiting. Slipping the acorn into his pocket, Lysander rose to his feet. The moth was still there, hovering just beyond the edge of the clearing, its soft blue light pulsing gently. It seemed to be waiting for him. With a deep breath, Lysander stepped forward, following the moth as it led him further down the winding path. The lanterns grew brighter now, their light more vibrant, casting long, shifting shadows that danced among the trees. He noticed more carvings along the trunks, spirals, crescents, and shapes that looked like stylized leaves and flowers, glowing faintly under the lantern light. The forest was alive with symbols and signs, each one whispering of an ancient story that he was only beginning to understand. It felt as if the path was guiding him toward something important. But what? Lysander's thoughts were interrupted as the path opened up into a small clearing, the lanterns arranged in a perfect circle around its edge. In the center stood a figure, a tall, graceful woman with silver hair that cascaded down her back like a waterfall. She wore a long, flowing gown, the color of the night sky, and in her hand, she held a staff topped with a softly glowing orb, the guardian of the lanterns. Lysander felt his breath catch in his throat as she turned to face him, her eyes shining with a light that seemed to come from within. She smiled, a gentle, welcoming smile that put him instantly at ease. "Welcome," she said softly, her voice as gentle as the rustling leaves. "I see you have found the path of the lanterns." Lysander stood at the edge of the clearing, the soft glow of the lanterns encircling him in a perfect ring of light. The woman before him, with her ethereal presence and shimmering gown, seemed almost otherworldly. Her hair, long and silver, flowed down her back like a cascade of moonlight, and her eyes, a bright, luminous green, reflected the glow of the lanterns. Everything about her radiated a quiet, gentle power that made Lysander feel as if he were in the presence of something ancient and wise. "Welcome," she repeated, her voice carrying a soft musical quality that resonated through the clearing. "It is not often that we have visitors on this path." Lysander took a tentative step forward, his gaze never leaving hers. There was no fear, only wonder and a growing sense of reverence. He felt as though he were standing in the presence of the forest itself, embodied in this graceful figure. Who are you?" he asked, his voice barely more than a whisper. The woman tilted her head slightly, a small smile playing on her lips. "I am the guardian of these woods, the keeper of the lanterns that light the way for those who seek the truth. You may call me Eloria." "Eloria," Lysander murmured, testing the name on his tongue. It sounded both foreign and familiar, like the name of a place remembered only in dreams. Eloria stepped closer, her movements as fluid as the wind. Her gown, deep blue like the night sky, shimmered softly in the lantern light, and the orb atop her staff glowed with a steady, calming light. "And you, Lysander, are not here by accident," she continued, her voice gentle yet firm. "The lanterns do not light the way for just anyone. They have chosen you, drawn you here, because there is something within you that seeks something more." Lysander blinked, surprised. "Chosen me?" He glanced around at the lanterns, their soft glow illuminating the clearing. The idea that these lights had led him here, that they somehow held a will of their own, was both strange and intriguing. "Yes," Eloria said softly. "The lanterns are not mere objects. They are imbued with the magic of the forest, ancient and powerful. They light the way for those who need guidance, for those whose hearts are open to the mysteries of the world." She paused, her gaze searching his face. "Tell me, Lysander, what is it you seek?" He hesitated, caught off guard by the question. What was he seeking? He had wandered into the woods tonight on a whim, drawn by a restlessness he couldn't name. But now, standing here, it felt as if there was something more, a deeper longing he had yet to fully understand. I don't know," he admitted quietly. "I just felt drawn here, like I needed to see where the path led." Eloria nodded slowly, as if she understood. "There is a yearning in your heart, Lysander, a yearning to see beyond the ordinary, to touch the magic that flows unseen through the world." She gestured around them, her hand sweeping over the lantern-lit clearing. "The forest feels it too. That is why it called you tonight." Her words struck a chord deep within him. The restlessness, the quiet sense of yearning he had carried for so long. It was as if she had put a name to the emotions that had always been just out of reach. He took another step closer, drawn in by her calm, steady gaze. "But why me?" he asked. "I'm no one special. I'm just a traveler." Eloria's smile widened, warm and gentle. "Everyone is a traveler on their own path, Lysander. And every traveler, whether they know it or not, seeks something more. Tonight, the forest has chosen you because it sees a spark within you, a light that resonates with the magic of these woods." She pointed to the pocket where he had placed the golden acorn. "And you carry the acorn, the symbol of the forest's heart." Lysander's hand went instinctively to the small acorn in his pocket. He pulled it out, holding it up to the light. The golden surface gleamed softly, the spiral pattern etched into its side, catching the glow of the lanterns. What is this? That, Eloria said softly, is a token of the forest's blessing. An acorn of gold, a symbol of growth and potential. It is said that those who carry it are marked as friends of the forest, protectors of its magic. Lysander stared at the acorn, feeling its weight in his hand. A friend of the forest? The idea was almost overwhelming. He had always felt a connection to nature, a love for the quiet solitude of the woods. But this was something beyond anything he could have imagined. What am I supposed to do with it? He asked, looking back at Eloria. She tilted her head, considering. That is for you to discover. The path you are on is just beginning, Lysander. The lanterns have guided you here, but what lies beyond this clearing is for you to choose. There is more for you to see, more for you to learn, if you are willing to walk further into the unknown. She stepped back, raising her staff. As she did, the light of the lanterns brightened, casting long, shifting shadows across the clearing. The trees seemed to sway gently in the breeze, their branches whispering secrets that only they could hear. Follow the path, and you will find the heart of the forest, Eloria murmured. There, you will see the source of the lantern's light, and perhaps you will find the answers you seek. Lysander looked around, his heart pounding. The heart of the forest. The idea both excited and unnerved him. What would he find there? What mysteries awaited him in the deeper woods? But as he looked back at Eloria, he saw only calm encouragement in her gaze. She believed in him, in his ability to walk this path. And in that moment, Lysander felt a surge of determination. Whatever lay ahead, he would see it through. Thank you, he said softly, bowing his head. Eloria nodded, her smile serene. Go now, Lysander. The lanterns will guide you. She lifted her staff, and as she did, the lanterns beyond the clearing flared to life, creating a bright, shimmering trail that wound deeper into the woods. With a deep breath, Lysander turned and stepped forward, leaving the clearing behind. As he walked, the light of the lanterns guided him, the path glowing brighter with each step. He didn't know what awaited him at the heart of the forest, but he knew one thing for certain. He was meant to be here. And whatever the forest wished to show him, he was ready to see it. The path ahead seemed to stretch on forever, each lantern glowing brighter as Lysander ventured deeper into the woods. The trees around him grew taller, their trunks thicker and their roots more tangled, twisting across the forest floor like the veins of the earth itself. The further he went, the more the air seemed to hum with energy, vibrating softly around him as if the entire forest were alive and watching. Time felt distorted in this place. He couldn't tell how long he had been walking. Minutes, hours. The lanterns, each casting a gentle golden glow, were his only guide through the maze of trees. But something in the air had changed. The once cool breeze was now tinged with warmth, and the moss beneath his feet seemed to pulse faintly, as if lit from within by a soft, hidden light. As he rounded another bend, the forest began to open up, and the ground sloped gently downward into a wide, shallow basin. Lysander paused at the top of the slope, catching his breath. What lay before him was unlike anything he had seen before. The lanterns formed a perfect circle around the edge of the basin, their lights flickering softly in the darkness. In the center of the circle stood a towering oak tree, its branches spreading out like the arms of an ancient guardian. The tree was massive, its trunk so wide that it would take 10 men with outstretched arms to encircle it completely. Its bark was silvered with age, glimmering faintly in the lantern light, and its roots twisted and curled around the base like the coils of a sleeping serpent. But what caught Lysander's eye was not the size of the tree, nor the brilliance of its bark. It was what lay at its heart, a stone altar nestled among the roots, with a large glowing crystal set atop it. The crystal radiated a soft, ethereal light, illuminating the entire clearing in a warm, golden glow. It pulsed gently, like a heartbeat, casting shifting patterns of light and shadow across the ground. Lysander felt his breath hitch in his throat as he stepped forward, drawn by the sight of the crystal. The closer he got, the more he could feel its energy, a gentle, thrumming presence that seemed to resonate deep within him. He reached the edge of the clearing and hesitated, his gaze locked on the crystal. It was unlike anything he had ever seen, smooth and faceted, like a giant gemstone, its surface glowing softly as if lit from within by 1,000 tiny suns. As he moved closer, he noticed carvings etched into the stone around the altar, symbols and runes, similar to those he had seen along the path, spiraled outward from the base of the crystal, their lines delicate and precise. Each symbol seemed to hum faintly with power, glowing faintly in response to the crystal's light. He knelt beside the altar, running his fingers over the carvings. The symbols were old, far older than anything he had ever encountered, and yet he felt as if he could almost understand them. They spoke of balance, of life and death, of the turning of the seasons and the cycles of the earth. And at the center of it all was the crystal, the heart of the forest. "This is what you were meant to find," Lysander started, his hand jerking away from the altar. He spun around to see Eloria standing at the edge of the clearing, her staff glowing softly in the darkness. She stepped forward, her gown trailing lightly over the moss-covered ground, and came to stand beside him. "The heart of the forest," she murmured, her gaze fixed on the crystal. "It is the source of the lantern's light, the center of the forest's magic. It has existed for centuries, long before the first human ever set foot in these woods." Lysander looked back at the crystal, his heart pounding. What is it?" he asked softly. Eloria's expression was serene, but there was a note of sadness in her eyes. "It is the heart of life itself, the essence of the forest, the magic that sustains it. Every tree, every creature, every lantern, it all flows from this one source." She reached out, her fingers brushing the crystal's surface lightly. "But the magic here is fading." Lysander blinked in surprise. "Fading? But why?" "The balance of the forest is fragile," Eloria said quietly. "For centuries, the lanterns have guided those who were meant to protect it. Travelers, wanderers, those with hearts open to the forest's call. But fewer and fewer have heard the lantern's song in recent years. Fewer still have heeded it." Lysander felt a pang of guilt twist in his chest. I didn't know." "You are here now," Eloria murmured, her gaze softening. "That is what matters." She gestured to the altar, her eyes shining with quiet hope. "The lanterns have chosen you, Lysander. They believe that you can restore the balance, strengthen the heart of the forest." Lysander stared at the crystal, his thoughts racing. Restore the balance? How? He was just a traveler, a wanderer who had stumbled into this place by chance. What could he do to help? As if sensing his confusion, Eloria placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "The acorn," she said softly. "The golden acorn you carry. It is a seed of potential, a symbol of renewal. If you place it at the heart of the altar, it will merge with the crystal and strengthen its light." Lysander's hand went to his pocket, where the small golden acorn lay. He pulled it out, staring at its smooth, gleaming surface. The acorn seemed to pulse softly in his hand, glowing faintly in response to the crystal's light. It felt warm, alive, as if it held a piece of the forest's soul within it. "Will it work?" he whispered. Eloria's smile was gentle. "Only if you believe it will. The magic of the forest is not bound by rules or laws. It is shaped by those who carry it in their hearts. If you believe in the power of renewal, if you believe in the beauty and strength of the forest, then it will work." Lysander took a deep breath, his gaze locked on the crystal. He could feel the weight of the acorn in his hand, the warmth of its magic. Slowly, he stepped forward and placed the acorn at the heart of the altar, just beside the crystal. For a moment, nothing happened. Then slowly, the acorn began to glow. Light poured from its surface, golden and warm, spreading outward to envelop the crystal. The carvings on the altar lit up, one by one, the runes glowing brightly as the acorn's magic merged with the crystal's light. Lysander stepped back, his eyes wide as the clearing was bathed in radiant, golden light. The crystal pulsed, its light growing brighter and brighter, until the entire clearing was ablaze with warmth and energy. Lysander felt a surge of power wash over him, filling him with a sense of peace and connection, unlike anything he had ever experienced. It was as if the entire forest were alive within him, its heartbeat echoing in his chest. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, the light dimmed. The acorn melted into the crystal, its surface smooth and unbroken once more. But the golden light remained, steady and strong, filling the clearing with a sense of calm and renewal. Lysander let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. The forest felt different now, stronger, more vibrant. He turned to Eloria, his heart racing. Did it work?" he asked softly. Eloria nodded, her eyes bright with joy. "Yes, Lysander, it worked." Lysander stood in the clearing, his gaze fixed on the glowing crystal at the heart of the altar. The once fading light was now bright and steady, its golden radiance spilling across the moss-covered ground and casting long shadows among the ancient roots of the towering oak. The entire forest seemed to pulse softly, as if breathing in harmony with the crystal's renewed energy. He took a slow, deep breath, feeling the magic of the forest resonate within him, a gentle, soothing presence that filled him with a sense of connection and peace. For a moment, he closed his eyes, letting the sensation wash over him. It was unlike anything he had ever felt before. The restless longing that had haunted him for so long, the feeling that he was searching for something just out of reach, had faded away, replaced by a quiet sense of purpose and fulfillment. "You did it," Eloria said softly, her voice filled with quiet pride. "The heart of the forest is strong once more." Lysander turned to her, a smile tugging at his lips. "But I don't understand. How? I just placed the acorn on the altar. How could something so small make such a difference?" Eloria's eyes shone warmly as she stepped forward, her movements graceful and fluid. It is not the act itself, Lysander, but the intention behind it. The forest responds to the hearts of those who walk its paths. Your belief in its magic, your willingness to give of yourself to restore its light, that is what made the difference. Lysander looked down at his hands, turning them over slowly. He could still feel the faint warmth of the acorn lingering on his skin, a reminder of the quiet magic he had witnessed. I never imagined. I've always loved the forest, but I never thought I was meant for something like this. Perhaps that is why the lanterns chose you, Aloria murmured, her gaze thoughtful. Sometimes it is those who do not seek greatness who are the most worthy of it. The words hung in the air between them, soft and weighty. Lysander glanced around at the clearing, taking in the sight of the lanterns flickering gently at the edges of the basin, their light now brighter and steadier than before. The creatures of the forest, too, seemed to have sensed the change. He could see small, glowing moths fluttering near the tree trunks, and tiny fireflies blinking softly among the roots. Even the trees themselves appeared taller, their leaves shimmering faintly in the renewed light of the crystal. "It's beautiful," he whispered, his voice filled with wonder. "The whole forest. It feels alive." "It always was," Aloria said gently. "But now, it is whole once more. You have restored what was lost, Lysander, and the forest will remember." Lysander turned back to the crystal, his heart swelling with quiet pride. He felt content. There was no other word for it. The forest had always been a place of refuge for him, a sanctuary where he could escape the noise and bustle of the world. But now, it felt like more than that. It felt like a part of him, a living, breathing entity that he was connected to in ways he could barely comprehend. "What happens now?" he asked softly. Aloria's smile was serene. "Now, the forest will continue to thrive, its magic preserved and strengthened. The lanterns will keep watch, lighting the way for those who seek the path, just as they did for you." "And me?" Lysander glanced down at his hands again, the sense of connection still humming softly beneath his skin. "What happens to me?" "That is your choice to make," Aloria replied, her gaze gentle. "The forest's magic will always be a part of you now, but how you choose to carry it forward is up to you." Lysander considered her words, his thoughts drifting back to the life he had left behind. The village, the quiet routine, the feeling that he was simply passing through without ever truly belonging. It felt distant now, almost like a dream he had woken from. Could he really go back to that life, knowing what he knew now? He turned to look at the forest beyond the clearing, the lanterns casting their soft light along the winding path that had led him here. He could see the trail stretching out before him, leading back to where he had started. But there was another path too, one that led deeper into the woods, where the lanterns glowed brighter, beckoning him forward. "You don't have to decide now," Aloria said gently, sensing his hesitation. "Take your time. The forest is patient, and it will always be here when you need it." Lysander nodded slowly, his gaze lingering on the path ahead. There was a part of him that wanted to stay, to continue exploring the mysteries of the woods and the magic that flowed through its veins. But there was another part, a quieter, more thoughtful part, that knew he needed time. Time to process everything he had experienced, to understand what it meant for him and the life he had lived before. He took a deep breath, turning back to Eloria. "Thank you," he said softly, "for everything." Eloria bowed her head, her smile gentle. "It is I who should thank you, Lysander. The forest owes you a debt of gratitude, one that will not be forgotten." For a moment, they stood in silence, the golden light of the crystal washing over them in gentle waves. Then, slowly, Lysander took a step back, his gaze lingering on the glowing heart of the forest one last time. He turned toward the path that led back through the woods, the lanterns lighting his way with a soft, steady glow. As he walked, the sense of peace and contentment remained, filling him with a quiet joy that he knew he would carry with him always. The forest had shared its secrets with him, shown him the magic that lay hidden in its depths. And though he was leaving now, he knew he would return. One day. The lanterns flickered softly as he passed, their light dancing playfully among the trees, as if bidding him farewell. The path wound gently upward, leading him back through the woods, the ground soft and springy beneath his feet. The air was cool and crisp, carrying the scent of pine and earth, and the stars above shone bright and clear against the midnight sky. By the time Lysander emerged from the woods, the first light of dawn was creeping over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. He turned back to look at the forest one last time, his gaze lingering on the dark silhouettes of the trees, the lantern's light just barely visible in the distance. A smile tugged at his lips as he stepped out onto the open road, the village lights twinkling faintly in the early morning mist. The forest might be behind him, but its magic would remain with him always. A quiet reminder of the night he had found the lantern's path, and the heart of the woods that had shown him who he truly was.